Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me back and allowing me to spend your morning, your baby Friday morning with all of you. I think we have a hand raise. Um, do you have a comment or was it like to say hello? No comment? Uh, it happens all the time. We press buttons and it does things that we didn't mean to do. But anyway, throughout the training, I just want to say if you have any comments, questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will do our best to address them. So I just want to say how grateful I am to see familiar names. And I am very excited to be here with you today to talk about strengthening protective factors, a path towards resilience. Now, again, if anyone needs any additional support, please feel free to, again, put in the chat. All right, so before we get started, here are some of the things that might be useful for you if you want to take notes, if you want to also take care of yourself. If you've been with me in the past, then you know that maintaining well-being is one of my main things, and it's the most important things when it comes to learning, that we have to feel good, we have to be good in order to retain any information. So please make yourself comfortable, have nourishment, whether it be snacks, water, coffee, tea. Again, anytime that we are together, this space and information is for you. So make your space the space you need it, so that it can be a replenishing and relaxing space for us to have this conversation. So as all of you already know, my name is Dr. Daisy Gomez, and I think I've seen many of your names before, and I have had the pleasure of meeting some of you in person. So welcome back and nice to see you all again. Just to go through some of the things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to do a brief review of traumatic stress, abuse, neglect. We're going to discuss the the framework of protective factors. We're going to discuss how we assess for protective factors within our families, and how do we, culminate the needs and respond in a way that we build our resource mapping. The things we want to acknowledge today, again, is how do we evaluate where we are, not just as individuals, but as individuals within a family, as parents, as providers. How can we be supportive in increasing those protective factors that we know will add to the benefit and to the successful outcomes of our families, of our kids and youth. We want to acknowledge that there's a couple of things that I do ask of you, and I ask you to be curious about information that might be new to you. Have an open mind into some of the things that we're going to be discussing, if it's, again, things that you might not be familiar with. Engage yourself in self-reflection, considering how this information could be useful for you, or how this information can be useful for those that you come into contact with in your community, your friends, your neighbors. Sometimes we gather information and then it hits us like, whoa, my friend would really benefit from hearing this, or from getting to know a little bit more about this. So please stay engaged, and remember that there's no such thing as perfection. There's only an ongoing process, and there is nowhere to go but forward. So I just want to acknowledge that. And with that, I'm going to jump right in to our first part, which is just briefly reviewing traumatic stress, abuse, and neglect. So before I get started in telling, and discussing what stress is, I would like to hear from you. When the word stress comes up or the phrases, come up when in regards to stress, I just want to know what comes up for you. And it could be a word, it can be a sentence, it could be a feeling. So in the chat, um, fear, okay, symptomatic symptoms, having no control, numb, sleeplessness, overwhelmed, overloaded. Oh, welcome from Canada. Oh, awesome. Anxiety, depression, dysregulation, stomach aches, not balanced. Uh-huh. Usually work related. And, I hope you were with us the last time we talked about boundaries and how do we maintain our well-being at work, which is a whole nother, stress manager thing. Overwhelmed, tired, pressured with deadlines. Yep, definitely changes in our eating. Okay. Huh. Motivated. Okay. And I ask this question because it always happens that we generally our first thought when it comes to stress is negative. Like stress has a really bad rap. It does have a really bad reputation. And one of the things that we have to acknowledge, and I think someone did when they mentioned motivation, is that stress is a natural and normal response for us living, for us acknowledging that there's things happening. However, most of the time when we acknowledge that stress is within us or that we are experiencing symptoms of stress, it's because it has moved from the first level of stress, which is positive. And positive stress, consider going on a job interview. There's a certain level of sweatiness, a certain level of anxiety, but it's just enough oomph to get you to be your best self in an interview. However, not all of us might have the best experiences with interviews. So remember that stress and your reactions to stress are going to be based on your past experiences. So that's just an example. But positive stress is a normal and essential part of our healthy development. It is brief in nature, which is, it's time limited. It does increase our heart rate. It changes our hormone levels. It changes our appetite for just that brief time, but usually it's gone within a matter of minutes or a matter of hours, depending how long the activation was. Again, was it a first date? Was it a new job? Was it, again, based on the experience, we have these short temperaments of stress related symptoms. However, based on the chat, most of you are more familiar with tolerable stress. Tolerable stress is a little bit more serious. The response is a little bit longer, and usually it can be supported. Therefore, it can lower with supportive relationships. And tolerable stress, for example, is jumping on Zoom and presenting to over 200 people. However, even though, and I always joke, I wear black every time I train or anytime I present, because stress will be taking over my body. I am sweating, so I wear black so you can't see. But one of the things about this tolerable stress is that I have supportive relationships. As you met the team briefly, we have Taylor, we have Flor, we have Ruby, and we have our other student. So therefore we have a community of support. And when this is all over, I will be able to eat again, right? Because during this time, my appetite has become, changed because I am really motivated and having a little bit of stress and anxiety presenting to all of you. A lot of us might first consider and only think of stress as this toxic one, which is a prolonged activation of this response, of this human natural response, activation of our all of our feelings, anxiety, fear, feeling overwhelmed, jittery, again, difference in sleepings, difference in eating. And sometimes this can be prolonged and feel even worse because of the either real or perceived lack of protective relationships. There might be times, whether it comes to work, whether it comes to supporting our family, supporting, our relationships, where we feel that we're all alone and we feel that there is nothing or no one that can help us out of this situation. And sometimes that toxic level of stress prolonged for a long period of time is what leads us into, creating this, the result of trauma. Now, trauma here, this is SAMHSA's definition of trauma, and they use the 3 E's. The 3 E's because there are 3 main components that are, developed during this event or series of events, this experience, and that is the initial experience, initial event, the way we experience it, and then the effects of it. And as you see, the individual trauma is a set of circumstances, and it changes, it has a response or a change in the individual's emotional, physical, and well-being. So all of this is part of how we characterize the way in which life and the events that we come to experience have an effect on the many different levels of our being or of our experience. And there is, many ways in which we characterize trauma. So one of the things that we want to be able to always acknowledge is this intergenerational historic trauma, because many of us, all of us, we come with history. We come with the history of our ancestors, a history of our, fathers, parents, grandparents. We come from a lot of different lineages. Whether we know it or not, we're affected by the experiences and the emotions of those that have come before us. There is a cumulative level of written trauma, and we now know that it's in our genes. So many of us, if you consider just your typical life experience, have you ever been in a situation where out of nowhere, out of not having any to pinpoint that emotion, you feel sad, or you have these levels of ups and downs that are just, there is no way to acknowledge where they come from. And I see Vanessa. Vanessa, you have your hand raised. Did you have a question? Okay, maybe not. Um, so again, and in the way we see it within, family members from a certain area or a certain culture, is that we start to see it in very different ways in which we live, the places that we go to, the stories that we tell, the kind of people that we have around us, the kind of people that we don't have around us. So all of that is cumulative, and all of that, has a story behind it. And the reason why we talk about this first before going into the other types of trauma that are more involved with the individual experience is that this ancestral trauma is something that we have no control over. So again, we are all experiencing a lot of different emotions, and sometimes we don't know because of ancestral, historical, and intergenerational trauma. So when we talk about the trauma cycles within families, within cultures, that is very real. We also have acute trauma, and acute trauma is more related to our individual experience. And it's a one-time, short duration event that can have long-term effects on our well-being. And acute is by no means to say that it has a less effect. It just talks about, it refers to the duration in which this event happened. And again, here are some examples: witnessing or being in an accident, losing a loved one. Again, it was short in duration. We felt the emotions deeply, and it could have a long-term effect, but again, it was short in its duration. There's also chronic trauma. And chronic trauma, again, relates to the individual experience in which we are experiencing or we are witnessing ongoing relentless trauma. It could be a chronic illness. It could be experiencing long-term homelessness, in abuse within the family, living in unsafe neighborhoods, not knowing what's going to happen next. And then there's also complex trauma. And complex trauma is a collection of many different types of trauma that are just cumulated together. And sometimes this is what we most see, and in our families and in our communities where there is poverty, where there is a lot of instability and poor resources. We see these combinations of trauma that are very hard to decode and very hard to get to the root of it. But one of the things and one of the reasons why we pinpoint these different types of trauma is because when we are able to talk about it and distinguish the ways in which we have been harmed, or pinpoint the ways in which we've been affected by events or circumstances, we are much closer to healing ourselves, because I am a strong believer in the science that says, name it to tame it. So if we are able to name it, share our stories, be drivers of our narrative, we can have this sense of empowerment that can really change our lives and the way in which we connect with others. So here we're going to talk about how sometimes having these pressures, having these, things that we have no control over, how they may lead to abuse and neglect within, communities, families. So many times when we are dealing with our own trauma, our own pain, we might be, we might be not well. Either we might have medical issues, or we might suffer with, mental illnesses. And sometimes those things are very hard to distinguish from trauma symptoms. Again, community violence, poverty, family separation, that is, very, especially here in LA County, there we have some, communities where this is a norm: family separation, absent parents, absent fathers, insecurity with housing, insecurity or lack of services, mistrust in services, especially, when they're free. I know that sometimes it's like, whoa, you're giving this for free. What do you want? And instead of taking advantage of that opportunity, it gets met with suspicion and, a little apprehension. So again, these are all, clues of what we have been through before, of what life has been before we showed up. So these are some of the ways in which we can start to see and pinpoint the things that we're looking at, and see how they might have been, adaptive and environmental skills learned from past experiences. And stressful situations are identified, and this is what we call risk factors, because no matter who you are, parent, provider, child, adult, we all in our lives have this balance, and we have risk factors and we have protective factors. So today we want to acknowledge the risk factors, but we want to focus on protective factors. Okay, this is all the bad things that could have gone on. These are all the things I might not have control over. So what can I do about it? So this is what we're going to talk about today because protective factors will strengthen and help buffer against these risk factors. So as protective factors increase, risk factors decrease. And I know it might be a simple, thinking that more protective factors, less risk factors, but it is that simple. When we are able to focus on what good there is and how we can enhance that, we are able to minimize what is harming us, what is most difficult for us. And we're going to not only talk about the ways in which we do that, we're also going to talk about the ways in which we seek support when we alone cannot, either reduce the challenges or need additional support to figure out what am I doing and what do I need to do better. And in order for us to do that, we have to acknowledge that all of these concepts are centered in this trauma and resilience informed system of care. And here are the pillars or the principles of what that means. It's very easy to say, oh, yes, I am trauma and resilience informed trained. But when it comes to practice, the everyday actions that we do, sometimes it might get a little, it might get a little gray. Like, is this what am I supposed to do? Is this what? But I tell you, if you center yourself around these core principles and what they mean, you have a better chance of, when in doubt, you lean on these traits. So for example, safety and nurturing. And when we talk about safety and nurturing in terms of like dealing with individuals, human beings, relationships, we're not only talking about the physical safety, because of course that is very important, but we talk more so about the emotional and psychological safety. Can I trust you? Can I tell you things that I have never told anyone? So consider the way in which we create that space for the safety and the nurturing to happen. When there is that sense of, and we go into the next one, when there is that sense of trust, when there's that sense of, I can be myself, I can tell you my vulnerabilities, there is that bubble that is created and the relationship becomes, stronger and it becomes more real. We talk about stability, knowing what to expect, knowing that I can count on you. Very often we might have individuals that come in and out of our lives. They might come in for a quick second, say, hey, I'm going to be here. Call me anytime, text me anytime. And then you call, you text, and they're not there. And that ruptures that sense of stability and that sense of trust that we're trying to harness. We want to do all of this journey through collaboration and support. There is no cookie cutter for any one family, for any one program, for any one community, let alone ecosystems and states, and you can go bigger and bigger with that. But through collaboration in each relationship, and each relationship is different, and if you have more than one child, how they're so very different. Everyone is so unique, and therefore the relationship is going to be unique. However, that collaboration and support will always be something that will nurture and enhance that, protective and trusting relationship. Empowerment and choice. We want to be able to give the people that we're in relationships with, no matter what the age, we want to give them the voice that every single one of us strives to have. And that empowerment of being able to speak and say the things that they hold dear to them. We want to be able to provide choice whenever possible. And sometimes it looks very, very, it's very, very simple, such as, we can set up the boundaries and provide choice within those boundaries, such as for breakfast, would you like to have Cheerios or pancakes? Right? We're not going to allow candy or any of those, right? But we have a set of choices that have been, countered in this boundary. So when we think about choices and we think about empowerment, it's not freelancing, but it is providing that sense of security and safety with boundaries and limits that we all, thrive in, with that sense of empowerment and the decision makings that, hey, I have a say so, you know, even if it's I have a say so in what I'm gonna have for breakfast, or I'm gonna have a say so in what pajamas I wear for bed. So here are how we get creative with how we practice these principles. Again, we want to be mindful, and we want to be not just mindful, but respectfully curious when it comes to the cultural, historical, and social issues. We cannot think that we know someone because they look like us, or we can't think that we know what someone's been through because of certain types of information that we read on paper or things we have heard. It is always a case by case, individualized experience that we have to look at, and that's why we are centering so deeply into that individual relationship. And all of this is wrapped up in that strength-based approach, that we know there's going to be challenges and difficulties, but we have to acknowledge that for us to enhance what's good, we have to look for it. We have to bring it out. We have to acknowledge it, and we have to feed it. Many of you are probably know the tale of the two wolves. Well, the one you feed is the one that survives. So again, we have a lot of ancient thoughts and concepts that have, lasted the traditions and years of passing on the story, because we have found so much truth in it. And again, this strength-based approach is knowing that we have to focus on the strengths, on the abilities that we have, so that we can minimize the deficits and the limitations. Because when we are building those essential elements of who we are as individuals and who we are in a family, in a community, in a society, we have to be able to acknowledge it in ourselves first and foremost. That's why the strength-based approach and all of these concepts that we're talking about, take them in as an individual reflection, and also consider how these make up part of your larger world, and will continue to do so. So, okay. Just checking to see if there's any questions so far. So now we're going to get into the protective factor framework. So some of the things that we want to acknowledge is that there are many, many different types of protective factors. For this particular presentation, we're going to be talking about the protective factor framework as it relates to families and those that support families. Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. So the first thing we want to acknowledge in this framework is a parental resilience. Again, when you are the leader of the pack, when you are a caregiver to anyone, right? Because relationships and families are, they can look very different, they can be very different, but parental resilience, or what I would say leader resilience, is something that is very important. And that's why we have to nourish and take care of self before we can do so for anyone else. Secondly, we have to, acknowledge that we need knowledge of parenting and child development to be able to support those that are in those stages, that are, we are following through this journey of life. Social connections. As human beings, we are social beings. So when we say it takes a tribe, it takes a tribe. None of us are gonna ever have all the answers, and all of us have different experiences that can add to the wisdom of other people that might be going through something similar. We also want to pay attention to the social and emotional competence of children. We know that there are many different factors and many different ways in which children develop their sense of being, their sense of showing emotion, of socializing, but we want to be able to cater and scaffold the way in which we enhance the opportunities for our children, for our nieces, nephews, and even for adults to enhance their social and emotional competence. Or in other words, if we were talking another through other trainings, it would be the emotional intelligence, which is something we all have. We just have to strengthen in many different ways. And knowing how to reach out. One of the things about strong, supportive individuals is that sometimes it's so hard to say, I need help. So understanding that, how to gather concrete support in times of need. And it's not a weakness to say, I need help. It is a strength. And it really takes someone to be fully, in that sense of like, I'm going to do this, to be, to be willing to have someone join their journey, and also acknowledge that no one person can do it alone. So now we're going to talk about parental resilience and what that means. In plain terms, that means that we are able to manage the stress that comes our way. Again, we acknowledge that there are many different kinds of stress: positive, tolerable, and toxic. And again, many of us will be probably experiencing more tolerable and more toxic more often than not, especially during these times that are uncertain and definitely difficult at many different levels. That we are able to face these challenges, the adversity and the trauma with, that sense of I can do it, strength-based approach. What are some of the things that we can, what are some of the things that we have that make up this parental resilience? Is that, again, that ability to manage stress, having that self-confidence that I can do this, having that flexible, curious mindset of being open-minded and allowing problem-solving skills to be exercised, maintaining hope and optimism. It is so important that no matter how dark times get, that we have something that we are able to hold on to bring us hope, to bring us back to that path of, what, it might be dark and lonely right now, but I have, there are things and people I can reach out to. Being able to manage negative emotions. Sometimes as a parent, I can tell you firsthand that I feel like a total failure. I'm like, I should know better. I should do better. But remember that as human beings, all we have is our own human experience and our own, I'm going to give it my best, shot. And during those times of negative emotions, how do we talk ourselves back up? How do we acknowledge the fact that we did our best? It might have not been the best, but we did our best. And that has to be enough. And again, this is an ongoing process, and there's only moving forward. And help seeking. How do we know, when it's time to reach out? And I always say, when in doubt, reach out. If you are asking, am I doing this right? What should I be doing? Reach out. Nowadays, we have, ways to seek anonymous help. If it's something that's difficult for you to do, we have groups and networks, that are willing to put on talks and chats to help other people that might be struggling as well. And we have to, also acknowledge that in theory, parental resilience sounds awesome. Who wouldn't want to have that, sense of resilience, that social connection that can help you in times of need? So, sometimes in theory, things seem to work out great and they sound incredible. However, we sometimes fail to see the way in which we can use everyday actions to help us build, enhance, and maintain those same traits that sometimes seem unreachable for us. So, for example, one of the ways to cultivate our parental resilience is practicing self-compassion. If I was to say, raise your hand if you are harder on yourself than you are on anyone else, I think everyone would probably raise their hand. Yep, I saw you, Irene. You have to have that self-compassion, because if we don't have it for ourselves, how is it going to trickle down? It's very difficult. So practicing self-compassion, again, when we feel that we are not up to par, saying, I'm doing my best. Instead of being our internal critic, let's be our internal cheerleader. Like, you know what? You got this. You did your best. And you know what? Everyone makes mistakes. That's why there's erasers. There's erasers because people make mistakes. Okay. And there's always ways to be able to erase those things and start all over. We also want to honor our family's culture, history, language, parenting practices, and race. One of the things that we have learned through looking at, historical and intergenerational trauma is that sometimes that historic and intergenerational trauma gets perpetuated even amongst ourselves, because we start to talk differently. If we were made fun of the way for the way we talk, for the way we dress, for the traditions and culture beliefs that we had, we start to assimilate, we start to change, which leaves us and our relatives and families and our communities with a sense of lost the identity. And when we are able to embrace the uniqueness of our cultures, of our heritage, of our ancestors, it brings pride and optimism to who we are as people, to who we are as a society, as a community. So acknowledging and honoring those differences and uniqueness of our families is one of the ways in which we can, again, increase that resilience within self and within our family. We also want to, kids will always look at what you do and maybe not always listen to what you say, but they are seeing what you do. So model effective ways of stress manage. If you are getting to a place where you're overwhelmed, it's okay to say, you know what? I need a timeout. I need to go for a walk. I need to drink some water, or I need just a couple of seconds for myself. Start to normalize that sometimes during time of stress, we just need a little buffering. Whether, again, it could be whatever brings you a little peace, a little joy, and share that. Share that with your loved ones in relationships. It's okay to say, you know what? I can't talk right now because stress is just overwhelming right now. I need a moment. And it's okay, because you are modeling, you are demonstrating how to handle stress without talking about, oh, when you're stressed out, take a time out. It's much, much more effective when you show how you manage stress. And again, always focus on the wins. We might not have too many, but when you do focus on those little wins, we are able to enhance those wins, and those wins will be more, consistent and more, repetitive, which will be able to acknowledge more so and more so. Focus on the wins. There's always, they say there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes we have to look and squint really, really hard to find that light. But, we try hard enough, we seek help, and we can find it. The next part of this framework is the knowledge of parenting and child development. There is no such thing as I know it all or I'm an expert in this field. Even those that have expertise in the field will always be looking for education and ways to enhance their understanding. And this is the understanding of child development, parenting strategies, how to, find support for physical, cognitive, language, social and emotional development, because every child is different. Every person is different. So therefore, this is a never ending, wisdom and knowledge seeking adventure. And if, you have you've been placed in a situation where you've had long experience with children or with adults, and you still get stumped sometimes with like, oh my goodness, what do I do? I should know what to do. It's okay, there are no shoulds, because every experience, every day, it's a new day. So you will be confronted with different types of people, with different types of children, with different challenges. So one of the things we want to do with understanding that this is a never ending learning process is we want to nurture our parenting behavior. And again, similar to the parental resilience, we want to have compassion when we might feel that, we could have done better. We also want to know what the appropriate developmental expectations are. What should a 2-year-old be doing, around this stage? What should I expect from a 13-year-old? My child is 8, so what should I expect when she's 9? So if you have any suggestions or advice, I am open, because there's always ways and there are always new gems that you can learn from other people who have had those experiences before you. We also want to create that supportive environment for the child. And again, think about the core principles: that safety, emotional, psychological safety, that trust, the stability, that empowerment, that choice, that voice, again, within boundaries that are safe and nurturing for them. Positive discipline techniques. And some of those, it might be a hit or miss, because again, different children will respond differently to different types of discipline techniques. So, really scaffolding to what is working for your child, for the children in your care, for the children in your community. So, really scaffolding. And again, it might take a little bit of footwork, but you get to understand what works for a child and what doesn't work for another. One of the things I'm trying right now is a point system. Many of you maybe have children that just finished school and they're off for the summer. Yay. We have to find ways to keep them busy, right? We have to find activities and things so that we can do what we have to do, either in our professional or personal life. So finding what works for you and what is going to enhance that, positive behavior in your children, in our supportive relationships. And then responding to a child's needs, knowing how to effectively identify and address, what they might or might not be saying. And again, this comes to the way in which we allow for that social and emotional competence to develop. So here are some everyday actions that can enhance and can help us cultivate that understanding of parenting and child development. So model developmental appropriate interactions. The way you talk to a teenager might not be the same way that you talk to your 2-year-old. The way you talk to another adult might not be the same way that you talk to your teenager. So, acknowledging that sometimes we have to, what do they say, code switch. We have to code switch, and that is a talent, let me tell you, when you are able to just meet everyone where they are. And sometimes it's hard because it does take a long time. It takes practice or it takes effort, but doing our best to meet them where they are. We want to seek out parenting and child developmental resources. Again, these fields are ever growing. There's always new information out there because we're growing and learning every day. So we want to be able to, Google what is the latest in child development, or even specific questions. Should I expect this? Or how possible is this? We have so many resources at our disposal. We also want to try out new parenting strategies and explore parenting issues. And again, it's not to criticize ourselves because we're practicing self-compassion, but it's to understand what other people have, what has worked for them, what other things people deal with, and how can we learn from one another. We all always, and again, I'm going to sound redundant and you might get tired of this, but we have to always, you know, use a strength-based approach. We have to be positive in our thinking when reflecting on our actions, on our parenting actions, on everything, because if not, it can be really difficult to come back from that shame and guilt that can add up when we're very highly critical and we don't practice self-compassion within ourselves. This leads us to the social connections. Again, we're social beings. So developing positive relationships that provide that emotional, informational, instrumental, and spiritual support. Let's not forget the spiritual support part, because sometimes we can't even verbalize how we feel, but just sitting next to someone or being on the phone with someone that provides you that sense of comfort. And again, it could be unexplainable, but there are many facets of our human experience that are unexplainable, and therefore we have to feed all of those that sometimes need replenishment when we are on the go, go, go. And part the characteristics of establishing these social connections are trusting relationships, making developing those friendships and those relationships that you feel you can trust, that you feel you can count on, having that mutual respect and appreciation from one another, resourceful social supports, knowing that when we reach out, we can actually learn from one another or seek support together. And that sense of connectiveness, again, you're not alone. And when we pay attention and we feed this part of our social need for connection, we are able to constantly feel that we're not alone, because feeling alone can be a very difficult place to be in. And it's an easy place to, it's very easy to find yourself feeling alone. So again, remember that social connections, even when we don't feel like we want to, at the end of the day, will bring us more peace and joy. And some of the ways that we can do that, we build and sustain social connections, whether it be groups or chats, or we've also done reading groups, right? Where a book club. So there's many different ways in which we can stay connected and sustain that social connection, whether it be like, hey, this is my, 6 p.m. walking group, or whatever it's possible in your neighborhood with those friendships that you have. Enhancing your knowledge of neighborhood associations. What's out there? What's in your neighborhood, in your community, that you can have access to? Sometimes we have so many resources in our own community, but we don't know because we're not looking, or they don't advertise, or they're just a little hole in the wall that, you see people coming in and out, but you don't know exactly what they do. So sometimes, doing a resource map on your community, and we're going to talk about exactly how to do that. Support participation in community activities. And sometimes it could be difficult for us adults to join community groups or activities. But if you have children, young adults, or kids, it could be easier to kind of infuse yourself in a community-based, organization that way, because they often have a lot of groups and activities for younger kids. And then the kids go off to do their activity, and then us parents, we stay behind and we start to chat, we start to get to know each other, and that's how we start to build our sense of support, our sense of community. We also want to acknowledge that dedicating time to family activities is important. We might not always have the time to specifically all be together and sit down and have a meal or watch a show or have a tradition. But, there is so much joy and so much, positive outcomes when we do take the time to do so. And it could be very simple, as in, before we all go to work or school, we have breakfast together. Or, when you get home from school, we all have dinner together. Or, hey, we all like this family show, family game night. Dedicate time to having that togetherness time. It will pay off. And, many of you, if you had it or didn't have it, I'm sure, it's very vivid in your mind. If you had it, then you remember those times. And if you didn't have it, I'm sure, many of us wish that we had that family time. Um, Here, we talk about the building social and emotional competence. So, family and child interactions help children develop their ability to communicate clearly, recognize, regulate their emotions, and maintain and establish and maintain relationships. You know, our children will mimic the type of relationships that they have at home, the type of relations that they see at home. So the more that we're able to have and sustain those positive, nurturing connections at home and talk about them, talk about what makes relationships great, we will be able to put those tools and plant those seeds in our children's way in which they see relationships and the way in which they make and retain relationships. Some of the characteristics is being responsive to the needs of our child. Positive parental mood, and it's all embedded within each other, because in order for us to have a positive parental mood, we have to take care of ourselves, right? We have to be able to have our time, attend to our needs, so that again that can trickle down and we can be there available, not just in body but in mind and soul, to listen and to respond appropriately to the needs of those around us, whether they be our children or our partners or our community or at work, our colleagues. We want to be able to have satisfaction in our parental role. We want to be able to acknowledge all the good that we have to offer and all the good that we have offered already. We want to be able to have a safe environment for children. Again, safe empowerment, stability. And again, all of this is about setting those limits, those boundaries that are going to eventually help our children create boundaries and limits for themselves as they grow and have many different kinds of relationships. And then we also want to acknowledge that there is a separation, separating emotion from action. And one of the ways in which we most do this is that in the labeling. We see this often in very short amount of short spans of events that were just very highly emotional. Or sometimes we have seen some of this language in schools, which we are trying to ratify now through restorative practices, which is, Johnny is loud, he's aggressive, has bad behavior, Johnny is a bad kid. Well, no, Johnny is not a bad kid. Johnny might have done, behaviors that are problematic, but we're able to separate the action from the doer, and of course, separate the emotion from the action, so that we can talk more clearly about each and every single one of those. Because ultimately, grouping all of those together just make for a very complex identity formation. And as was mentioned before, my specialty has been in working with high risk populations, gang involvement, juvenile, and other types of justice related individuals. And one of the things that always comes up is, well, they always said I was a bad kid, or they always said that I would be no good. So this labeling might not seem like a big deal at the moment, but it has long lasting effects on the individual who is receiving or hearing these comments be made. So in order for us to cultivate, in our everyday actions, some of this social and emotional competence in our children, in our, relationships with others, is we want to model that nurturing care and support that identity development, with our families. Remember that we are not our actions, um, just because let's say my goal is to get up early in the morning and do some exercise. Because I didn't do that doesn't mean I'm lazy. I just didn't do that, right? We start to self identify and self label. But remember that when we use these words towards ourselves, we sometimes might use them towards others. So that self compassion goes a long way and it trickles down in very, very different ways. Providing that social emotional development activity for children. So, kind of enhancing and bringing it out. And it could be in storytelling, it could be in drawing. There's many ways in which kids act out their feelings and emotions that be brought out in very nurturing and loving ways without them feeling that they're being interrogated or that they're being questioned in a way that might make them feel uneasy to share. We also want to respond appropriately when there are social and emotional development needs that need extra support. There's no such thing as overreaction when it comes to individual feelings because our feelings are real. And even if we have different types of expressions or different types of ways that we are being impacted by a event or a series of circumstances, no one person is ever going to feel the same. Therefore, when we are witnessing a child or a human being go and react in a certain way, we don't want to say calm down, we don't want to say relax, because sometimes we might be invalidating their feeling. um, I would, encourage that we say, I don't know how you feel. Could you help me understand? What does it feel like? And then people again can start to identify the way in which they feel, because if I'm overwhelmed with emotion and you tell me to calm down, I'm gonna try to suppress the way I feel. And there's always a joke. They say, don't ever tell a Latina to relax because it produces a counter effect. Let me just say that sometimes when you're trying to have your emotions and people tell you to suppress, it can arouse many other emotions that might not be so positive. So we want to acknowledge and validate everybody's experience is different, and their emotions, they're right to have those emotions. So for us, it's our job to be respectfully curious and say, I am not understanding this reaction. Could you help me understand how you feel? And it can open the door for them naming it. And again, when we name it, when we can tame it, but we first have to acknowledge that it's there. And then we have the concrete support in times of need. How to access concrete support and address our family's needs, and all of those can help minimize stress and the challenges that can come with that sense of I need help, I don't know what to do. So we have to acknowledge that we need our basic necessities. Sometimes we are forced through our circumstances to become resourceful, and we don't want to get to the point where I had to go out there and find these things for myself, but we want to be able to access things in time, in times that we might not be desperate for them, but we have them. It's better to have them and not need them than to need them and not have them. So we want to be proactive when it comes to addressing our basic needs. We want to understand the rights to services. So again, many of us might be a little hesitant to accept, free resources because we're like, what's the catch here? But understanding, informing yourself on what these resources are and how to, access them, knowledge of relevant services, navigation of service systems, and all of these might seem a little complex, but we're going to walk together through a series of examples of how we can harness this. And then ultimately, financial security. Many times we might say, well, money doesn't solve everything, but if we don't have enough for our basic needs, money seems like the world. like the most important thing. So we want to be able to find ways to find that financial security. And if we're not there, then find ways or seek support so that we can meet our basic needs. Because without meeting our basic needs, then we can never really get to the next level of enhancing and growing, because we're on survival mode. And when we're on survival mode, our world looks very, very small and very, very, dark. So we want to be able to address all of those things. How do we do that? How do we cultivate the support in times of need? We respond appropriately when in crisis. We validate the fact that we might need help. We validate everyone's emotions and everyone's way of responding. Again, we expand your awareness of the connections and support systems. If you have friends, if there are organizations out there that provide support for, the specific and unique challenges and needs that you're experiencing. We help each other develop the skills needed to identify our needs and the importance of connecting to our support, whether it be your emotional support system, your financial support system, any other type of resource, and the systems that might be there, or the people that might be there to provide that support. So I know I've been talking a lot. So I want to provide us a time for you to think about the things that we've been talking about. And we're going to have breakout rooms in which you're able to think and discuss amongst yourselves about these everyday actions, because I truly want this experience to be, a give and take. So I want to be able to learn as much from you as I can during this time. So we provided a certain, certain examples of everyday actions. So I want you to think about those, but most importantly, I want you to think about some of the everyday actions that you have implemented in your lives, in your personal, professional life, that has been effective for you. And then lastly, be prepared to just share out. And again, if your participation can only be via chat, let your team members know, like, hey, I'm only available in chat. If you're not showing video, that's okay too. So just, we're going to be mindful that everyone's situation is different. But the more ideas and thoughts you have about these everyday actions would be, extremely beneficial for us to learn as much as we can, and hopefully enhance those examples. So we're going to go ahead and do breakout rooms.
All right. Hi, Daisy. I'm going to go ahead and put everybody in their breakout rooms. And if you're able to broadcast the instructions, I think that would also help folks.
Thank you.
We're going to do it. Go for it. You guys will have to click join to join your breakout rooms. Thank you so much. Daisy, I think most people have joined rooms at this time.
Just going through the chat.
Folks are wondering about your slides and whether those will be shared.
Yes, I think we always share them, right? I send them over to you, or right?
Yes, that's great.
We've done it before.
If you're comfortable with that, we can send it out via email. Sure.
The only thing they tell me is to send it through a PDF, so
yes,
they can be edited. Okay, cool.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you. My voice.
You're doing so great.
Cool.
Thank you. So everyone's in their rooms. And I actually, so we have about 19 minutes left, so we may need to,
Wrap it up.
I would say, reduce the amount of time in the breakout rooms.
Okay, yeah, that works. Instead of 15, we can do 10.
Sure. So I'll bring them back in at 11:20. How does that sound?
Yeah, that works. Yeah, because the last part is not very content filled. It's more so an exploration of how to navigate services.
That will give you about 10 minutes or so. Is that enough?
Yeah, yeah, I can make it work.
Super. All right. I'm gonna turn my camera off. Okay.
Okay,
Let me know if you need.
okay, thank you.
Hi, I just had a quick, I just wanted a copy of the questions because we were all, so let me take a screenshot.
Oh, sorry, we could put them in the
Yeah.
we could send them
In the
through
breakout room?
the room. Let me see, how do I do that?
Otherwise, I can take a picture of it.
Let's see any of the functions.
Daisy, if you're able to just copy and paste like what's on that slide and send it in a chat to me, I can broadcast the message to everyone.
Okay, I can do that.
Sorry to keep on. Can you put me back on in my breakout room?
Oh, sure, sure, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lucia.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Where'd you go? Let me see here.
And I forgot what breakout room I was in.
I know. I'm sorry.
Were you committed to that group? Did you
No,
like
we
the
really hadn't even really started talking. So
um, Lucia, do you see at the bottom of your screen where it says breakout rooms?
yes.
Can you click that and then just click join or like you can join a room? If that does that work?
Yeah, it's working. I'll do that.
Super. Thanks for being with us and we
No problem.
appreciate you all at CII.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Daisy. I'll broadcast that.
Good girl. Put some music while we wait. Welcome back, everyone.
That was really good.
You liked it, Jacqueline?
Yes, I really enjoyed it. I accidentally hit leave the room. I was talking and I know they probably said, what happened? But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for multitasking. I can see you're doing multiple things at once. I appreciate you joining.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for participating. Oh, we still have a few people joining us. So while we wait, I'll put a little bit more music. There we go. Trickling back in. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Just a question. Are we going to get these slides and recording for us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
These
you.
slides, yeah, these slides and the recording will be available to you.
Such a beautiful resource to share with our clients. So I want to keep it.
Awesome. I'm glad you find this very interesting and informative. That is always our goal, to have something that people can take back and use for their personal or professional resource collection.
You know,
Okay.
even though I attend these for my work, I always learn something new for my personal too. So
I'm
yeah.
so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
That is
Thank you.
awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It's great presentation, Daisy. I will share with my foster families as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's empowering.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's always our goal. You know, this space is for all of you because we really have so much wisdom and knowledge when we get together, and just having an opportunity for, all of us to hear a little bit of everyone's experience and wisdom, where they come from, what they've learned. It just adds greater power to our movement towards, being a more connected and communicative system of people that are in this for the reasons of caring and loving one another and providing that support. So thank you all so much. So can we have one person, because we're running out of time, we have another short thing. Could we have one person either unmute or in the chat, just what's one of the everyday actions that you can share with the group that could really be an addition to our everyday actions that we've mentioned previously?
I'll speak on behalf. This is Kathleen Sunt, and I don't know, is my video, my video might still be on. But on behalf of our group, I think one of the things that was most talked about was the being safe and reassuring to the kids that we work with. There's a lady that worked in the DCFS with DCFS kids, another lady who was talking about how she sort of is overseeing a certain area of where the kids that she works with, and she is very reassuring, tries to reassure them when they're nervous about being put in a new placement, and how just assuring them what to expect, sort of de-escalating anxiety. Myself, I work with kids as a CASA and have experienced the importance of how having a safe place for them and a safe person just completely, like I was talking about how one child would just get in my car and fall asleep. And that would be, he'd drive around and be asleep the whole time. And it was really not a matter of not getting sleep the night before. It was a matter of there was just so much anxiety. He was exhausted. So being able to have that type of a person in the life of these kids in the system specifically, not even of course our own and our own selves, but kids in the system that are dealing with the kind of stress you're talking about. We felt that being a safe person and being a safe place was really probably most beneficial almost of everything.
Thank you, Kathleen, for sharing. And I would agree. I would say that, in essence, all the things we've talked about kind of, overlap. And I think the bigger thing is having that safe, trusted, stable person, organization, sense of community and connectiveness. And if I was to just add one more thing is, especially when it comes to individuals, no matter what age, but especially our youth and our young children, is that when we have an opportunity to interact, that we, no matter how experienced we are, how helpful we want to be, that we listen to understand, and we don't listen to try to fix, because we as people, we're not broken. We've just have gone through something. We've gone through something that has changed the way in which we see the world, the way in which we feel in it. So sometimes when we just listen for understanding, I think it really provides and helps enhance that safety and that trust within the relationships we're trying to establish. So thank you.
Where is your pencil, your other pencil?
Was that for us? I know many of us are leading multiple lives all in one. But thank you so much for sharing. And I wish I had more time, but I've been talking too much and, and we're running out of time. But the key takeaways from this part are that traumatic stress, no matter who is it on, can lead to
So we were a number.
Can lead to potential abuse and neglect if we are not, mindful and in the present moment to see how our actions or interactions can affect individuals. We also want to identify protective factors within our families, the people we support, the people we communicate with, and highlight the everyday actions that we can increase to continue this strive for healing. Because again, we talked about how no matter who you are, where you come from, there is something that we all hold within from, and in the chat, thank you for saying that, for the experience that we had in the womb, for our experience being born, for our experience growing up. So all of that, culminates to this picture that we have of the world and the perspective that we take when we interact with every other human being, whether it be our child, our parents, our partners, our community members, our colleagues. We carry around with us this collection of experiences. And for us to move forward, because we have so much wisdom already in the group, I would really like to highlight that sometimes assessing protective factors can be difficult when we're looking within. That's why we have an example here, and I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it out loud because I know some of us don't have access to the visual. So here we have a quick example so that we can identify how sometimes it's easier to see the needs in other examples, and it's a little bit harder when we're looking within. So here is Sandra's story. Sandra is a 28-year-old mother of two from Inglewood, California. She has struggled with substance use issues for over 10 years. She has two children, Kayla, age 4, and 9-month-old Joshua. While Sandra and Kayla's father, John, are no longer together, he is still active in their lives and has Kayla 3 days a week. Joshua's father moved away and it's not actively involved in their lives. Sandra and John have a healthy co-parenting relationship, and John often helps Sandra with the care of Kayla and Joshua. While Sandra's substance use has historically been a source of tension between the two of them, John continues to be supportive of Sandra. Currently, Sandra believes herself to be an engaging mom. She sings songs, plays appropriate games with both Kayla and Joshua, and is in tune to their needs and limits. Sandra now recognizes how her previous challenges with substance use impacted her parenting. When Sandra was reported for child neglect 2 years ago, she saw it as a wake-up call. Within the last 2 years, Sandra completed a substance use treatment program, called her mother or Kayla's father during the time she needed childcare assistance, spent time with both Kayla and Joshua. Although Sandra gets frustrated with her children at times, she enjoys seeing Joshua stand and crawl and hearing Kayla count to 10 out loud. So again, looking at someone else's story and experience can help us identify ways in which we can mirror their understanding or sometimes identify needs. So here, when we talk about how can we support Sandra, what might be some of the things that we can see that would be very helpful or supportive in her journey towards healing herself, healing her family, and overall completing those goals that she has for her and her family. So here we can identify that need for support of parental resilience. Again, self-confidence, practicing self-compassion, because as it mentions, sometimes she does become overwhelmed, and anyone can become overwhelmed. Understanding concrete support in times of need. She reaches out to her mother and to Kayla's father when she needs support. She has understood that it takes a village. It takes everyone involved in the support system to be part of especially challenges. And knowledge of parenting and child development. Obviously, through her experience, she has been exposed to resources and information that talks about how spending time with your kids, that sing along, that playtime can be so powerful in terms of building connection and sustaining that relationship. So again, that was just a short example. And again, you all have these slides so that you can again share it with others and have it as a source of material to refer to. But then when we assess the need, how do we then address it? And this is what we talked about, creating that resource map, knowing what's in your community, in your city, in your county. And some of the ways in which we do that is this community resource mapping. And some of the things that we have learned is that when we empower individuals to not only assess their needs, but also reach out and find out what is out there, we promote that self-efficacy. We align, we provide our ourselves and our families with aligning the services with their specific needs. It improves outcomes, and it overall enhances and provides an opportunity to enhance supportive networks. We want to also identify that when we are able to strengthen this skill of resource mapping, it leads to families making decisions that are based on their need and what's right for them. It enhances that collaboration, that empowerment and choice that we say is so important in the lives of everyone, so that we can practice that trauma and resilience informed system of care. Resource mapping is a combination of pre-mapping, which is assessing what might be needed, mapping, putting our resources together and identifying what is out there, taking action, calling to make an appointment or get information about what are the requirements, what are the rights to services, limitations, and then keeping a list to maintain and sustain and also evaluate. Just because there's a program that is down the street from your house, but they provide offer service or they don't meet the needs that you specifically need, then we have to be able to evaluate and also pick what's right and right and well for ourselves, so that we can maintain this ongoing relationship. Pre-mapping is identifying the associations, individuals and institutions that are in our community that could provide us that support and that enhanced knowledge and resources. We want to be able to set the goal for how far can I go? Am I traveling in public transportation? Do I have a car? So acknowledging what our limitations are, selecting resources that are beneficial and that we meet the criteria to receive. We want to be able to use, whatever mapping tool has been beneficial for you. Here, we're going to look at 211, and I probably should be a spokesperson for 211, just because I really love the way they have mapped out their website. And if you haven't used 211 in a while, I suggest you take a look at it, because it received a facelift. And it looks really good, and it's really user-friendly. Ultimately, we want to call our resources, or we want to visit. We want to determine if this is the place for us. Do I feel comfortable here? Is it a stress-free process? Is it a convenient level of service? Are the times convenient, and can I access it? We want to also keep track of the progress, identify challenges, navigate resources. And many times after you have walked in or you have received services, many organizations will send out a survey to kind of hear about your experience. And if you do have feedback, I suggest you are very honest, because when people send out those surveys, the people that are receiving it back, very often do have the intention to rectify any challenges and make their services and organizations more friendly towards those that need the support and resources. So we want to be able to be honest with our service providers. And here are there any other than 211, are there any other resources? It was frustrating at one point. Yeah, are there any other resources that any of you have tried that has not been too stressful? Care portal, navigator.familydoctor.org. Awesome. Yes, if you have to go, please go on. Am I holding people back? Yes, I am. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, just to quickly, this is one of the ones that I really like just because you're able to pinpoint exactly what your needs are. As you can see, the categories, there are, ways to identify that you're looking for a child, family, and then it gets broken down into a collection of services. You're able to identify if it's a parental program, get information based on your zip code, get a description of what those services entail, the address, the what's needed, the limitations of it, and you're able to see if you qualify, if there is a fee, and then you're able to make that informed decision. So thank you so much. I know I have kept you almost 10 minutes over, and I appreciate your patience. So I hope you had a great morning with me. Thank you for all of you who just shared your time and your wisdom. And you will be receiving these resources shortly. So thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free, and I can always email you with my response.